Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two globe-trotting digital music mavens. One has graced our stage previously, the other I have pursued for quite some time as a guest. And I promise you will leave here today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. The second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And also ask questions of our speakers. Also, this is very important. Please make sure that your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not do this for free. Special thanks to MedJet, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and Better Than Booze. Let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my good friend, Vickie Nauman. She has deep experience in the intersection of music and technology, focusing her business on rights and licensing, products and experiences, and strategic business development. She founded the boutique consulting and advisory firm called Cross Border Works and has a portfolio of forward-thinking companies from large enterprise to early-stage startups. Her work spans music legislation, thought leadership, the entire stack of music tech, product management, music finance, partnerships, and being a subject matter expert, giving her a unique perspective on the ever-changing global landscape. As a digital pioneer, Vickie worked on licensing and product for one of the first legal digital music services called MusicNet back in 2001. She led strategic partnerships for connected device manufacturer Sonos, started and ran U.S. business and global music platform 7 Digital, and did digital business work in Europe and China as a consultant. In addition, she built one of the first DMCA compliant services at tastemaking station KEXP in Seattle. Vickie has broad network and experience in Europe, China, and in the US, and has earned her MBA through the London School of Economics, NYU Stern, and HEC Paris. And joining her today as today's featured guest is Marie Clausen. She is Managing Director of North America at Ninja Tune, one of the world's leading independent record labels based in LA. She's a German-American music executive with 20 plus years of experience in music strategy and leadership, as recognized by multiple Billboard Power Player Awards. Marie is currently serving on the Merlin Management Board. She's also the co-founder of the rapidly growing female leadership program called Merlin Engage. She works with artists such as Thundercat, Odessa, and Barry Can't Swim. Her previous work appointments including Universal Music and exclamation K7. I don't know if I said that right, Marie. It is a pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform today. Please take it away, ladies.
Amazing. Thank you. I love that introduction. And Vickie, I can only say congratulations to your CV. That's incredible.
I know, I hear that and I think I didn't do any of that.
That's amazing. It's great to put it all on paper, isn't it?
Exactly.
Congrats.
I'm so excited to do this, Marie. And, I was trying to remember when or how we met. And I feel like it was at an event. But
At a
then,
national dinner during Grammy week, actually. Like a women only dinner, which was incredible. Yes. And
right.
I have always admired you from afar, like as someone that is just standing out. So it was really great to get to know you then and feel like, yeah, we became friends.
I know, exactly. And then we're both here in LA and so I think for this conversation today, want to really dive into your journey, first, like your
Mhm.
journey, because there's no, the working in the music business, it's not like, like you're joining a corporation, you're at Intel or Procter and Gamble, and you go from, product manager to senior product manager to VP product manager, the everybody's journey in the music business is different. And that's part of what I love about it, because people get to basically make things up. You make up what you want to do and where you want to be. But you have a really interesting origin story of how you were from Germany and then you found yourself in New York and then you went to LA. And so I want to tell everybody about
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I started my career back in the early 2000s in Berlin, Germany, in Universal Music, and had a phenomenal time then. It was the time of the Black Eyed Peas were big, Justin Timberlake, Nelly Furtado, and I got a first taste of like really what drives consumption in the business. Video was still really, really big back then, but also working with incredibly smart people who were just doing some really great cultural things, and I just loved it. And from there I went to a smaller independent label called K7 Records that I stayed with for quite a while, because I think at the age of 26 they offered me a job in New York, and I think that was a very pivotal moment. Obviously the German music industry is a strong market, like I think number three worldwide, but America is where it's happening. And so, yeah, at the age of 26, I moved to America and thought I'd be there for a year. But I ended up staying. I'm a citizen by now. I'm married. I have two children. I call Los Angeles my home, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity that happened because it was in so many ways really life-changing.
Well, I also love that you were 26, because
Yes.
and moving from Germany to New York, if you were 10 years older, you probably would have thought, "Oh, I don't know, is that enough money? Can I make it in New York? And I pay rent? What's this going to be like?" But when you're 26, you just probably jumped in, and you just like, yes,
Yeah,
did you
100%.
have doubts?
I did have doubts, but I think that there is something when you move to New York, which is that you understand that you can become anything you want to be. And there was a moment where it's either I'm going to sort this out, or I cry and go home. And I felt like I had nothing to lose. So to me, the challenges I had was language in the first place, not understanding, not having a network of people within the industry. The market was changing a lot as well. Like it was the time when, it was pre-Spotify. We didn't have Spotify in America yet. I remember Steve Savoca and others starting to talk about them launching in America, and that was a new thing. So this experience basically had taught me a couple of things. It's like you have to come clean and deploy strategies on getting more knowledge on the areas that you don't have. So what I did was took language lessons. I started running, like my office was right under the Brooklyn Bridge. And so I would always just go laps between Brooklyn Bridge and Manhattan Bridge. And at some point, I was running up to Central Park. And at some point, I ran a marathon. But like all of these things from just getting moving and progressing made me move forward and acquire new skills. And then obviously also just I was reading the music industry news every day. I like was going through Billboard. I was connecting with mind-minded people. And then I think the number one thing too is to like learn where the consumption is going. So I very early on focused on digital because that was really what wasn't clear how this going to work, but it was clearly something there. And it had led in many ways to where I am now and in my career. And yeah, it was a tough time back then, but it was also full of change and just opportunity. And I am beyond grateful that I had this time in my life. Yeah.
I also think it's great that you saw digital as an opportunity, and I did too. And but there were so many people at the time that didn't, and they wanted to cling to this business model of selling CDs and, understandably, I mean, I didn't work in the industry at all in that era, but if they cost $1 and you're selling them for $24, of course you want to hang on to that
Yeah.
business model. But it wasn't where the movement was going. Everything was going online. People wanted to get singles, people wanted to access all of this music. um do you naturally get drawn to new, kind of new and emerging things, or what made you make that distinction back then?
Um, I think it started because nothing was working. We put records out and they just didn't work. We just received a lot of physical returns. Nobody was interested in anymore, and we didn't know how to market online. So in that it didn't work. So I needed to figure it out. That was the one thing. And I think from that I learned that the market will never ever like change is the only consistent that there is. Also, that there are often better and smart ways of doing things, and that we can learn from that. And I think working now is, running a record label where we are working with a lot of back catalog, but also amazing frontline artists. Everybody always wants to know where the consumption is going, and I think that's our number one job really, is to understand how to sell and connect artists with their audiences. And so going back to the digital era, yes, I love to try new beta programs. I like to be part of those conversations rather than not learning about it. And I think obviously right now we are in a massive disruption again with AI coming into the market. So all of these things, this disruptive phase from back then has taught me valuable lessons on how to approach this era right now. And I think it's really important to diversify and have lots of different revenue streams for your artist. And I am beyond grateful that I had those life lessons that helped me to navigate what we are facing in 2025 and beyond.
I think it's such a good lesson for everyone here. And
Yeah.
if there are young people coming into the industry today, like one of the staying powers of being able to survive in this industry is constant change and not being afraid of it. And I remember in in the early days, when mobile became huge for music, and that we were, trying to get music on mobile phones. And I was in a major label office. I will not mention which one, but I was having a conversation, and I was explaining, well, there's all these new operating systems. I was going through a deck, and I was like, yes, there's Nokia and there's BlackBerry, but now there's iOS, from Apple, and then there's Android, and these are these new operating systems, and it's going to open up all the capabilities. They're all, they're different than what we know with Nokia. And the guy, the, one of the guys in the room, he was running business development. He was getting this really sour look on his face, and he said, I spent all last year learning how Nokia works, and now you're telling me I have to learn how iOS and Android. This is just such a pain. And I thought, you are not going to survive because
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you can.
that's the exciting things.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, we
yeah,
get to figure it out.
yeah,
But if you resist that, you're
yeah.
just, you're never going to make it.
Yeah. And I think one other layer here, you had just mentioned majors. I also want to bring up indie because for the past sort of like decade, I have worked within the independent market and also strongly within licensing, at least with all my work that I'm doing with Merlin. I think this is one of the key bits that indies are having. They are ready to pivot at any point, and are able to go where the consumption is happening. And so this time, I believe, is actually a real opportunity to move forward because you can have access to the market. It's in many ways a very level playing field now, thanks to all the work that has been done in the last couple of years. But hooray to like everybody here also who is part of that community, because there are some really clever independent entrepreneurs who are really driving this technology change forward.
I agree. And I think we have, it's not an existential crisis night right now for indies, but I do feel like there's kind of a moment in time where I feel like, what does it really mean to be an independent label, and what does indie mean? And we've got this Universal downtown deal, we have Merlin, we have people that are considered independent can range from being a singer-songwriter in Kansas to Radiohead. And so, one of the things that I have always loved about independent music is that there's kind of an appetite to not just do what music is going to be popular, to push boundaries, to move quicker, to try new things. All of that kind of risk taking, I think, it results in great music. And there's not anything wrong with the big stars and the very polished pop music, but I do feel like there is something about the independent community that's like the lifeblood of
Mhm.
of the music business.
Mhm. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think to me, independent means to have to be independent in your decision making and to have the choice of how you want to operate your business. And so with that choice, obviously, there's deal making, there's the distribution, like all these different things that are coming into it. But I think that is the essence of it all.
Yeah. And so how long have you been at Ninja Tune?
I have been at Ninja Tune about almost a decade now. It's gonna be 10 years next year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And I joined the company when streaming was really, really kicking in, and I built up a very successful global partnership department. And it was at a time when we just signed an artist named Odessa, who were coming up non-traditional ways. So they didn't have a lot of radio, they didn't have a lot of TV, what they had was a very strong social media organic consumption, basically. And I will never forget this because I had just moved to LA. I started this new job. I also had recently become a new mom. And there was a lot of like new news. I also wasn't sure if I can truly like build an amazing department. And looking back, I think next to that move to New York, that was another very important point in my life. And it will again change, but actually it turned out to be an amazingly successful move. Like we really grew the company significantly. With the reason that I was naming Odessa is because that was an artist that I really dialed in and figured out how to work it globally. And it ended up being a top three Billboard album chart success from an independent artist. Um, and probably one of the biggest records I have worked on. And obviously, lots of other things came into place there as well. But it was just a wonderful moment. And from there, um, lot more positive things happened. I became managing director. I am working on the Merlin board, and uh, yeah, all of these things sort of led from one to the other, and very, very grateful to be able to get out of bed in the morning and do what I love. Is just the biggest gift. And I think there are just a lot of really exciting, brilliant people out there. So yeah.
I think it's fascinating too that you moved to LA, started a job, and became a mom. And
Yes.
sometimes life is just that way, where
Yeah.
I think some of it is you might have one change that is, like if you're pregnant, you're going to have a child, your life is going to change, and you have an openness to other things. And so oftentimes, life ends up
Yeah.
like you just upheave two or three things at the same time, and then you emerge from it and you're in a completely different mindset
Yeah.
place.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting that oftentimes in that moment, you actually don't realize that you're doing very important stepping stones because oftentimes our daily progress, you can't really see it. You see it over a span of 5 to 10 years. I wasn't aware back then that what I was doing was actually such important career changing work. But I was just trying to figure out what was the next big thing that, or next good thing that I could do on that day.
Right.
But yeah, ultimately, that I think that's the right thing to do. Yes.
I think sometimes it's also that you kind of know the things that you are interested in, and then you're aware and open enough to recognize them when they're in front of you. Because if you're not open,
Yeah.
you can have the best opportunity standing in your
In front of you, you may not see it.
and
Yeah.
you won't see it. And I think that happens a lot with people who are in really big corporations, and they are, they're in the churn of how their organization works, seeing the world with their organizational lenses on, and they just don't have the room to have that open mind and be able to see that there could be something completely different that might be way better, but it just requires a paradigm.
Yeah, that's right. How is it for you at the moment? Are you excited about any new opportunities or technologies?
I am. I mean, I also I also feel so lucky, like, because I have also just created this for myself in doing the work that I want to do. And when I started this business of my own in 2014, part of it was I'd quit a job, and then I started thinking about, well, what is it that is going to make me happy?
Mhm.
And I had bought a house, and I was working in the garden, and I just was like doing manual labor for 4 months. I took 4 months off, and the things that came up to me that were really important were autonomy,
Mhm.
being able to work on really creative projects with music, having
Mhm.
lots and lots of different things going at the same time, and working globally. And
Mhm.
I realized, like, no, that's not a job. Nobody's going to hire me
Mhm.
to do this, and just give me a job and say, do you figure out, do whatever do whatever you want. And
Yeah.
so I that's was when I decided to start my own thing. And the things that didn't come up at all in my what is important, what makes me happy, were title or prestige of a company or a salary. And so it was a really important thing for me to have that space to think about what I wanted to do, what's going to make me happy. And now, 11 years later, I'm so excited and just like ecstatic
Yeah.
about the future, because I do all this work in gaming and VR and AI and all of these changes that I feel are I just see no end in sight of the opportunities for music in all of these new experiences. And I feel so lucky that I mean, I guess we've kind of made our own luck, but I feel so fortunate because I feel like it's so satisfying to bring things to life with music.
Yeah. I agree. Could have not said it any better.
Yeah. The and I think the independent space is, I'd love to talk a little bit more
Mhm.
about this, because I think that I think that the independent labels are just putting out remarkable music and betting on artists. And there's so much oxygen being taken out of the conversation right now about generative AI music, prompt to music. And every time I go see a band, and they're almost always bands that are more on the independent spectrum, I feel like, well, this is so real, and this is so amazing, and it's so creative, and people putting their hearts and minds and every bit of energy they have into their music. That I feel really hopeful. And but I also feel like independent labels are forever resource constrained. They're always, understaffed. And where do you see the independent label, in today's landscape?
Yeah, so I think that to your point about how good it feels to see culture, um, and going back to the parallel of talking about AI and what that means, and obviously the danger that could also come from it. I think that right now it is really important to lean into the artistry and everything that makes like showcasing the human story, the real connection, because I think that that is really what we are all craving for. Like I believe that, oftentimes if you go to a really great concert or something like that where you can feel the culture, it's as if you are around a campfire and you're holding up your hands and like, oh, this feels so good. And to me, this is the essence of what is important to an artist and what I think everyone should be leaning into. And then just working extremely smart and using technologies and insight how to market records and again like understanding how the consumption works. And I think that yeah, we probably will see a correction to the market. 100% that's going to happen, but I also think perhaps we see even greater art because that is something that will be prioritized.
Right.
um
I
yeah.
think that I oftentimes think about AI in the same way as, because I'm old and I remember back when desktop publishing was created, and there was a period of time when all these, at that time it was newsletters, right? Every organization, everybody sent out newsletters. And there was a period of time when then everybody's like, oh my gosh, we can do desktop publishing. We can make our own newsletters. We don't have to hire a designer to lay it out, and that's expensive, and it's all has to be done manually. And so for a period of time, everyone sent around the most hideous, terribly designed
Yeah, they were
newsletter.
using Mailchimp or something like that. Yes.
Yeah. And then out of that came Photoshop. And then
Mhm.
then then graphic designers, people who had those skills, had a brand new tool. And then everybody realized, okay, yeah, we're not going to do this ourselves. We're not going to make really ugly newsletters anymore. And I kind of see that with AI, that I think what we have now of the just the generative music, I think it's a little bit like a party trick, and that what will really be the value and the long-standing value is production tools, mixing tools, better
Yeah.
ways of artists using technology and tools around their craft. And I think there will be exceptions where there will be, somebody,
Yeah.
it's a huge hit out of generative AI, but I think it's going to be the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that currently the demands on artistry are really, there's so much that an artist needs to do. So actually being able to use some AI tools to help elevate some of that is just going to be really great. I also think it's probably going to get worse before it will get better.
Yeah.
I also believe that we will need an industry-wide solution on how AI tagging is going to happen. I think it's really important that consumers can have a choice in what they're listening to, similar to how we know what the ingredients are on food that we are having or clothing that we are wearing. I think that that should be a consumer's choice. And I think that would be important to, yeah, to have an industry-wide solution for that. I hope some clever minds, or maybe we are part of that, will figure out. um
Exactly. Well, and I think that's actually a great metaphor of your food. Like, we want to know what's in our food.
yeah.
If you have a peanut allergy, you want to make sure that there's no peanuts in it. And we want to know all of this. And so why shouldn't consumers know? I mean, I don't think they have to know, like, oh, I used, version 3.5 of this AI mixing tool that's, a plug-in
No,
to
agree.
Ableton.
Yeah.
But I think that, if you're listening to music online, having a way to differentiate, whether or not it's generative or not, I think is important. And I also think that any music that is generative, I cannot see any legal solution that does not include a attribution. of what made up that generative song. And I think that is, I think that, there's a lot of noise about, oh, that's impossible. It's not impossible. It's only impossible if you put everything in the blender and then you then you try to extract information after it's in the blender, but it's all the same things of metadata and licensing and opt-ins and being able to know what
Yeah.
went into the machine and what's coming out. And I think that artists deserve that, labels, publishers deserve it, and fans deserve it.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I'm really proud on the Merlin side. The Merlin team was able to enter into a really forward-thinking partnership with a company called 11 Lab, sorry. And why this is important is because they were able to really have some fantastic guardrails in place that were not available like this in other AI licensing before, and like really showcase that there is a possibility to do this in the right way and to be on the right way of on the right side of history. And so I think those are the opportunities to, yeah, to embrace and lean into and have conversations in that area, because this AI is not going to go away. The train is going to leave, and either you are on it or not. But I think we got to have the right ticket for it, and the seats need to be arranged in a way that it is not backfiring and is sustainable. Yeah, and
I
has artist interest at heart.
I agree, and I think ultimately, the companies that are building generative AI, um, they're either pursuing the destruction of copyright,
Yeah.
or they are pursuing a next generation creative tool and
Yeah.
creative output. And some of them are trying to do both. But I feel like there have there have been companies saying that copyright is outdated, is impossible, that you can't possibly license music. That's what they said in 2000 when the original Napster disrupted the market. We figured that out. That's what they said around streaming. We figured that out. That's what they said around live streaming, around, all these different kinds of licenses. And honestly, it's just a tired argument that, whenever tech companies say, the copyright is outdated, I feel like, well, would you open source all your code and let your competitor use all of your code to build a product that's exactly like yours? I'm like, no, well, of course we're not going to do that. Well, then why would you think that intellectual property around music is outdated, until you're willing to do that and give everything up that you built with technical code? Copyright has a place.
Yeah. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience on all of this.
Yeah, and I also want to talk to you about um I also want to talk to you about, like, you know the kind of, you're a woman, we're both women in a mostly male driven industry. um y- you know I saw this article it was an op-ed in the New York Times, and the title was, "Did Women Ruin the Workplace?" And I followed all of this funny music, all these funny stories on, in social media, all these women posting, posting photos of themselves saying, "I'm off to ruin the workplace today." But
Yeah. Do you want to give a quick overview to the audience on what it was, in case people don't know it?
yeah, this was an op-ed in the New York Times, and it was written by a man, of course, and the actual context of it was not as bombastic as the headline. And then it was first, did liberal feminism ruin the workplace? And then the New York Times switched it, and then they said, did women ruin the workplace? And then they changed it again. So they changed the headline three times in one day. But it was ultimately just this thing of, like, how is this helpful right now? How is this helpful? And especially when women are, like, oftentimes disproportionately the ones that take responsibility for the home and for the children and for, running errands and running departments and companies. And we have this, manosphere that's happening out there. And, women are like, I really just want to go and do a great job at my job. It's very simple. We really don't need any more battles.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think the two things. I think there's been studies that showing companies are doing better that are having a broader gender balance on it. So that's the number one thing. It's good to have diverse opinions, views, because we all see different things and have different skill sets. That's why I think it's important from a business point of view. You will have greater outcomes. As my individual journey, I I have for a long time not thought about, oh, I'm a woman working in music, but as I started to have higher up positions or being a woman in the boardroom, I was oftentimes I was the first woman to be on the Merlin board for America, first woman to ever be on the management board ever for Merlin. That company holds 15% of the music market. What I've noticed is that everybody wants to have change. Actually, a lot of men are absolutely open and supportive and are often asking me too, what can I do? How can I contribute? I have a wife that I know exactly what you're talking about. I have a daughter that I want has a great career. I think that it's important that we are seeing this not as a women issue, but really as something that we need everybody for, men and women, to solve it. And secondly, that I believe it's really important to do some actual skill teaching. Like I was very lucky in my life that I had a couple of phenomenal mentors. And I think oftentimes I never realized that they were mentors. It was never said like this, but looking back, I can see that it was mentorship, indirect mentorship in a sense, basically. And I noticed that that has been a very, very, very powerful effect and led in many ways to where I am right now. And when I started to be in the boardroom, we were talking about getting more women on, and I'd always heard there's just not enough women out there, there are not enough qualifying candidates. And obviously that's BS. Like we are like everybody is very, very capable. It's basically about ensuring that women having the opportunities to reach the qualifications that it needs. And having had that experience of mentorship, I wanted to pay it forward. And we had an idea to start a mentorship program that really focuses on C-suite and making sure that more women are reaching C-suite. So we launched that with Merlin about 3 years ago. And
What's that called?
it's called Merlin Engage, and
Okay.
it's an extremely successful mentorship program. Like it has produced some life-changing results. And the reason that it's good, because I think the world has a lot of mentorship programs, which is great, but oftentimes it's just pairs being bundled together and then off you go, solve the problem. With this program, we got a really fantastic CEO coach in who's coming from Harvard. She's a woman herself, and she is doing workshops. There's a whole program from like a 6 month program basically where we're teaching skills. And I mean, I think everybody should have access, men also, but in particular this one is focusing on this really elevating women career and to create a funnel for women to have more opportunities and being considered for opportunities and actually landing them and contributing it, because it's one thing to have a seat at the table. The next one is actually to be able to input, to understand the conversation and to produce some really good results. And all of that just needs a little bit of help. Yeah, I know. You probably feel I'm quite passionate about it, but I love it because I see again, it goes back to uplifting community, doing good stuff, also having a business in mind. It's just a win-win all around. And the best thing that I'm noticing is that what was an idea actually is a community now, and it's just spreading further. And yeah, I think that there's a lot that still needs changing, but also there's some incredible people who are working on this, and that's just really positive.
I think it's so great because I also am all, you know, I'm still almost always the only woman, you know, like I
Yeah,
will work with
I am.
companies and there will be 6 men on this core team and me. And there are times that I think back to my life when I felt like I'm the only woman in the room and everyone's uncomfortable because I'm in the room. And now they're asking me questions that they're not asking anyone else. So then I have to establish that I deserve to be in the room, but nobody else has to establish that they're qualified to be in the room, but I do.
Yeah.
And you know, there are all these things that I feel like, you know, some of it is just, you know, people tend to, you know, like people who look like them and who are familiar to them. But I also feel like there is kind of a training that I think women need to be able to, you know, if they are not credited for their work, they need to be able to call somebody out in it in a way that is not the angry woman, not the raging bitch, you know, and they have to be able to kind of like recognize that they have to advocate for themselves. And I think that comes through you know, create reestablishing norms and training, and not just for women, but for men, that, you know, you can be an amazing advocate. I mean, I have incredible male advocates, but I've also had times where I felt like, you know, like I would not be dealing with a lot of this stuff if I, you know, if I wasn't a woman. And
100%.
you know, and I think that these things ebb and flow, and I've watched some documentaries back of like the 60s and, you know, 70s and, you know, civil rights and women's lib and all of that, and I feel like, man, we're having those same we're having the same problems now, you know, like we just don't learn. But I think it is really helpful to look back at the people who were really important mentors, because they oftentimes, you don't recognize it at the time. It's only
Mhm.
retrospect, and then to pay it forward and to support the next generation and younger women and trying to pass on the knowledge that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thank you
We
for
have
talking about this. Awesome.
there's a couple questions in here, and one of them I think is so important to dive into and get your opinion on, which is, you know, there's all these art
Yeah.
direct to fan, artist fan engagement platforms, companies, tools that are out there. Some people are withdrawing their catalogs from streaming services. Some are saying, you know, I only want to consider that promotional. I want to create a new revenue stream for myself. I want to create a direct fan engagement. Um, what are your thoughts about all of this?
That's a really good question.
It's a
Yeah,
hard
so
one.
we're basically talking about, I mean, I feel like that's this question from Sophie. She's asking,
Yeah.
how are musicians building revenue outside of streaming? And I think that that's exactly what it boils down to, right? Yes. So a couple of things. What I have found successful work successfully for our artists outside of streaming. One area that I think is really worth looking at is anything within the fitness space. For us, for example, Peloton became a fantastic partner. Um, and actually going back one more time, fitness space and being able to really like all of these new opportunities need master and publishing rights, right? And I think that's why it is so important to have good people in place that you work with. But 100% I would be looking at 100% I would be looking at Peloton and Apple Fitness. Those revenue streams from fitness, music being used in fitness classes, is now in our top 5 revenue drivers for artists. And I think that's something to look at, right? It's pretty good. 100% gaming. And I know, Vickie, you could probably talk a bit more about that as well, but there's a massive world out there. It's like so much bigger than music, actually. It's like by tenfold. And I think it's a massive opportunity for artists. And sync. Like
Yeah.
those are the ones that we're seeing. And then 100% by like selling directly, right? Like TikTok shop. Like all the things where it's a low margin and you are able to sell directly to your audience, I think is something that I would always prioritize. Yeah.
Yeah. So in it's all these things are these are the things that you just rattled off. Those are all the things that are exciting to me about the future. And a lot of it is a mix of a licensing fee, but it's also a way to not to have music in the background, you know? I mean, I'm so tired of just, like music that's just like wallpaper while you cook. I love music that is in your face and that is immersive and you're experiencing it, you're hearing it digitally. But I think like there's all these platforms that are trying to create artist fan subscriptions or artist fan engagement and, separate in like little walled gardens. And I want them to succeed. But the problems are always they're always the same problems where artists don't want to do that much. They want to be artists. It's not like K-pop where, people are releasing 10 videos a week. Um, these platforms can't rely and require the artists to do a ton of things or release unreleased songs. It's also the rights. People care about the rights. And so, or they care about the music. So then you have to get the music rights. But do you feel like there's legs on any of these of artists and fans and having fan subscriptions and having, kind of this little walled garden of artist fan tools and platforms?
I think that there's a lot of noise and it's often not clear. Um, and it's a lot of asks basically from artists. And I think that's when you have to have a really good manager in place who is zipping through it all and identifies what makes sense. There's like a million startups that are pitching their direct to fan
Yeah.
products, and I think it's yeah, you have to be really you really need to analyze it all basically and make sure that you know your audience and what fits them best, basically. Because ultimately, I think you want to make sure that your fan or potential fan can find you or learn about you or buy from you wherever they come across you, right? Like whether it's social media, whether it's at a local record store. Like I think it's just making sure that audiences have the option, and then get the fan into your funnel and bring it back to your artist page or your shop or whatever it is. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that came out of the whole Web3 that I era that I still
Sure.
feel like has merit is the idea of community and the idea that you are part of something more intimate with an artist. But community is really, really hard to monetize. You can't just, there's subscription fatigue. You can't just charge people another subscription. What is the value that you're getting? And some of the companies that had some of the artists who had some of the most successful communities found that what people really wanted were concert tickets. And they wanted to get closer to the artist, and those are those things that are they're just scarce. And but they're this basic, really, really basic thing. And I think a lot of this is also people are kind of confusing e-commerce with community, where they think, oh, if we just sell them, 14 different colored vinyl albums, you know, that's the same thing as community. And it's like, no, that's e-commerce, and you're going to burn out your fans if you're making, if you're kind of exploiting their fandom and then having them buy 14 different colored vinyls. So I just don't feel like anybody has the formula yet. I think there's something there, but it's how does, like if you take the money out of it, then it, like, yes, like you can imagine million different ways to engage. But if you need money to flow into it, it's just tough. It's really, really tough. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I had a lot of background noise. I think for a long time, Spotify has also always been talking about a fan tier, or like the industry is wondering what's going to happen. So, maybe we're going to see one of the more established partners to come up with an offering that is already complementary to another music service. Yeah.
I agree. And I think you said something that was really important, which was basically, you have to go to where your fans already are, and versus trying to pull them off of other platforms. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings with so many of these companies that want to do artist direct to fan, is that they really believe that artists are going to tell their fans to stop listening to their music in every other place and go only to this walled garden. And they're just not going to do that. And so I think all of these things have to somehow be integrated into these big platforms and big services where people are already gathering. Maybe there will be a good acquisition path for some of these young companies to end up at places that already have millions and millions of people listening to music. Does anybody else have another question for Marie? Please put it in the chat. What are you excited about in the future, like emerging technologies and that could be music that you're excited about, could be tech.
Yes. I'm actually really excited about a band. You guys should check it out. They're called Fuckers. It's spelled Fuckers. Band I'm not able to talk around when my kids are in the room. But I'm excited because I last night and the night before I went out to Tame Impala and they were playing at the Kia Forum here in LA. And Fuckers are a brand new band and they supported Tame Impala on this big run. And they only had a couple of tracks out. They're brand new, but really hot. And it was just going back to this moment of culture and what is it that actually makes everything so unique. I'm very excited about those guys and like their journey, and I can see my teams working on it. And I think they're going to break in the next couple of years. So that's exciting when you uncover something that's like, oh, this is just unique. This is amazing. Yeah.
That's great.
Excited about that. On the Merlin front, we announced a new CEO this week. That was big news. We appointed Charlie Lexton, who's been with the company for quite some time, and I was part of the recruitment process. And we've done that throughout this year in the summer. It just feels really great to have something final and knowing. And so yeah, somebody just said horrible woman lead the workplace. Or I hope that doesn't mean woman, horrible for women. Oh well. Anyway,
No,
um, yeah.
I think that was a reaction to when I was talking about the article that was
Oh, okay, God.
the
I'm sorry, I was really
article.
distracted. But yeah, no, I'm really pleased to see that's happening on the Merlin front, and like that gives security, I think. And he's coming to the company with such great vision for what's going to happen in the next couple of years. I think it's really good news for the independent market, for the independents everywhere. Um, and then this weekend, we have Camp Flogner here in LA, which I will go to. So I'm very excited about that too. And then generally just the Thanksgiving break coming up, because I am sure it's for everyone here the same. It's very, very fast paced. I think what we're doing working in music at the moment, and just taking a couple of days to reflect and not do any of it, I think will be really great. What about you, Vicky?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I just feel like there's like there's a frenzy right now and a sense of just this undercurrent of change. Um, and I always find I love change. I love new things. I'm kind of a junkie in that, and so I feel like it's a really exciting time to help
Yes,
to help shape,
stimulating.
shape the future. We have a couple questions I want to ask about. There's someone who asked about how to apply to the Merlin Mentorship Program for 2026. How does
Oh,
if someone wants to do that? How do they do it?
yeah. So this is open to all Merlin member companies, and yeah, they'll announce the new program in April next year. And then if your company, if you're working for a Merlin company, Merlin member company, then you can just apply. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, there's some really super technical questions, but this is another one that I think is really, really good to ask you, which is um, the future of the music business seems that we need people who are, ethical and they're fluent in technology, but they are very grounded in art and commerce and ethics and tech. What does how can the indie ecosystem cultivate those kinds of leaders?
How can they cultivate those kinds of leaders? It's a really good question. And actually something that I have been thinking a lot about because I believe that there are not that many really big opportunities for people within independent companies. So I think it's probably by what we are already doing by I think paying forward, being intentional, spotting good people, nurturing those. I think we also oftentimes have a lot of brain drain within the community, people leaving or going elsewhere. We also need to get the pay up. I think it's very important that people are making a great living. And yeah, I think just plus also the other bit, I think also paying attention to those younger generations because I find that I learn a lot from the people that I work with or I'm grateful to be able to work with because actually, as you said, the only constant is always change. So I think A, learning and paying attention to the younger generations and then paying forward what your experience, like the things that we already know, the life lessons that we had, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Feel
Yeah.
like I feel like the independent label sector and the indie sector is also they're just always resource constrained. And so that is real it is really, really hard and people are very passionate. But it's hard to keep people and it's hard to have, huge.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to scale for the independent market. And there we are just a lot of things that we are all doing on our own. And
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
we are
But
missing out on
everyone
those
has
effects.
similar challenges. So it feels like, I mean, Merlin and A2IM and AIM, all these organizations are good because they provide kind of a common, some sort of common forum for everyone. But I do still feel like, you know, the, you know, the independent artist, the true independent artist, their needs are very different than an independent label. And and the artists that are signed to an independent label, those needs are different. And so the indie sector, I think we oftentimes like put them in one big bucket, but the needs are different. The needs are really, really different.
Yeah. Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.
Exactly. Tom, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think we're at time and really want to send appreciation out to everybody who stayed with us. This was so fun.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, everybody. Very active chat.
Thank you for coming, ladies. Vickie, you know I love having you as a host here. You're always welcome anytime. And Marie, thank you for finally saying yes. I chased you for quite some time. Glad the calendars
Yes.
finally aligned.
And also, Tom, I'm happy to pay it forward. Call on me or for a host too. This is how it works.
You only have to say that one time.
Okay.
This is being recorded. Folks, I promised you'd leave here more enlightened than you arrived. I think we delivered on that promise. Thank you for being here. We only have a couple of shows left this year, including not one next week. We're going to take off early for Thanksgiving. I hope everyone has a safe and happy Thanksgiving. and come back here in early December. We'll see you soon, folks.
Thanks.
Bye.